Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed, unedited look into my workflow. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, animator, designer, and your friend. And I'm psyched, as always, to get into another episode this week. I rarely, if ever, get political. I hate politics, especially as it relates to my artwork. And in a rare moment, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get a little bit political with you guys today, to whatever small degree that I can. And it's really because today is the 4th of July. So I guess first things first, I should wish you all a happy 4th and a happy Independence Day. And then the reason that I'm going somewhat political here is just to sort of highlight the threat that some of our national monuments face. And there are some plans with our current administration to roll back and reclassify 27 some odd national monuments in America, which is a disturbing development. And as someone who loves spending time outdoors and goes camping and draws a lot of inspiration from his artwork, from the incredible natural beauty that our country has to offer, it's just a little bit alarming and troublesome, I guess I'll say. So I think so that I'm not going to go on large political rants this episode at all, but what I am going to do is really focus on Giant Sequoia National Monument, a really beautiful monument located in my current home state of California, and I just want to celebrate its beauty. I want to use it to whatever degree I can to draw awareness to the fact that these national monuments could be reclassified, and encourage everyone to read a little bit more about it and maybe contact their local representatives to encourage that not to happen. And I've dropped some links in the description below this video, so you can read a quick article about what's happening. Take a look at some of these photos of the 27 other national monuments that are being threatened, and then also a little form where you can contact your representative and encourage them to not let that to happen. So anyway, forgive the slightly political diatribe. It really, it's really about saving this natural beauty. And I think, as a fairly proud American, I would say that one of the things that our country has to offer most is some of the natural resources, the wilderness, the immensity and beauty of it all. I really think would be a huge shame to miss out. And if you'll forgive me, one last quick story. When California was first settled, the entire northern coastline, hundreds and hundreds of miles, were covered in enormous redwood trees. Sequoias being a type of redwood tree, I believe. And because of logging and sort of unchecked development, they're all essentially gone. And in Northern California, the one that remains is John Muir National Monument, or Muir Woods, they call it. And that is a small grove of beautiful, beautiful redwood trees that was protected, luckily, by Muir, who went on to found the Sierra Club. And it's a tourist destination. It's immensely beautiful. I visit there frequently, and if it weren't for its designation as a national monument, it would no longer be with us. It would be a very sad state. So anyway, all that being said, welcome back. Typically a very positive, upbeat show. So forgive the little doom and gloom political diatribe, but I think it's something worth protecting. And I think we're going to go on to a more positive look and really just celebrate the beauty of these trees and these parks for the rest of the episode. So thanks for tuning in. As always, these shows are best when folks are chatting, saying what's up in the comments, dropping questions, and frequently what we do is if you've got something you care to share with the rest of the community, it'd be great to just drop a link into the comments, and when we're rendering or have a minute to move away from our scene for a moment later in the show, then maybe we can take a look at that on the air. So send a link to a work in progress or a finished image or video that you're working on, and we can check that out. So that being said, you can see I've got some reference images pulled up, and look, even Google today is doing their 4th of July wilderness thing. Let's do this. If I could spell it. So yeah, we got some reference imagery on tap here, and I love sort of the quality of light in a lot of these images, and of course this red color is amazing in these trees. So let's recreate some of that. I'm going to start by creating some of these tree trunks and create sort of a base shape, and then kind of riff on it. Add some variation as we develop. Whoa, Aaron Haleli joined. Cool. Got famous artists up in the chat. Hey, Aaron. So I'm going to use a sort of grouping of these cylinder shapes in a cloner to create that really beautiful, gnarly sort of trunk look. Hello, Wormaze? Wormaze? Hope I'm pronouncing that right. How's it going? Happy 4th of July to my fellow countrymen and non-countrymen alike. I hope you're having a nice day. So, twist them a little bit. A little bit of variation in there. And we can use this angle to sort of create a nice taper. Gives you a little bit more of a realistic tree look. Cool. Just establish a ground as well. And what I'll do is drop a camera in, we'll get our perspective going, and that way we can really work with the composition. I'm just going to zero out this camera. Ciao. I think what I may look to do is create sort of an overall canopy, then include a lot of these trees sort of going back into the distance. The scale of these things is just incredible, though. With that. I'm going to make sort of a simpler version here that I'm going to clone and use for trees in the background. So I'll probably turn polygon reduction up a little bit, just make these a little less dense. Let's see. Cloner. Put the cloner in a cloner. A little randomness on it. Hello, Tedzar. Hello to Indonesia. Thanks for the kind words. And while I'm building in these trees, what I think I'll also do is build in a little bit of variation into the landscape, maybe some hills and little rough patches. Just sort of break it up. And as always, I start really basic. I probably won't get into texturing for a little while yet. Just really working with the composition. It's almost like the sketching phase. Throw a quick protection tag on the camera because I just navigated away, which I always do. Lock that into place. I think I'll also use a bit of a push apart for these distance tree trunks. And one thing to keep in mind is you can always come in here with these effectors. You go to the object that's being affected, go to the end, and go to effectors, and you can adjust the order in which these are applied to the object, which will often have an impact. What you can also do, which is really nice, which I think I'm going to do for this push apart, is you can just sort of turn it down. It's almost like in Photoshop how you turn down the opacity of an object. It's weird how it's not doing anything. It's really odd. Hmm. There we go. As I was saying, you can take the push apart and just sort of turn it down. Same with the randomness. You only want a little bit of randomness. You can adjust that using these parameters as well. Or if you wanted to animate a random move back to a non-random placement, you use these sliders as well. It's another way to adjust the parameters a bit, which I find useful. Hey Chris, thanks for stopping by, man. Doing some sequoia trees this week. Happy 4th of July. Oh man, working on the 4th, that stinks. Hopefully not too long or tough a day. I know what I also want to do is add a bit of a canopy. Wow, look at that. I should probably mix in some different types of trees here because you can see that it's not just the sequoias, right? And they add a lot of, the other trees add a lot of variation and interest into the overall view. Hmm. Wow. Let's see here. I'm going to try a new way of making a pine tree. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I'm going to sort of test it out on the fly right here. If it sucks, you all get to laugh at me. And it drives me crazy how, by default, the cylinder caps and sides are not connected in cinema. Who would want that? Who would ever want that? Come on. Come on, Maxon. I gotta take this thing and put it inside a Connect object. Expand it. And who wants their Fong at 180 degrees? Crazy. Hmm. Hmm. So I'm not crazy about it. I'm gonna throw it in the scene for now and see how it works. It'd be better if I add some height to it. See how it goes. Maybe I should add a trunk. Kind of reminds me of those little green plastic Lego trees I used to have. All right. I'm just sort of making some branches, some fronds that we can use to break up canopy and make things appear a little more natural. And we'll also start casting some really sweet shadows, which I think is a big part of a forest scene, is how the shadows look. Now we have the very real, possibility of just going ridiculous with poly count here. So I'm being mindful to not go too high. Make sure it's something my computer can handle while also live streaming. All that good stuff. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate the support. Yeah, I'm excited to release that map. That'll hopefully be coming out this week. I've got a bunch of stuff that's sort of halfway done now that I'm hoping to push out in the next couple weeks. So stay tuned. Hmm. Pardon me. So now I'm trying to think about the best way to place these. If I place them all by hand on these trees, that could take forever. Like some of them will want to selectively place so that they work in the composition the way we intend. There's probably a better way to do it though. Doesn't look right. I think I'm making my computer unhappy with all of these cloners and cloners. What's going to speed this up a little bit is I'm just going to turn the trunk into a single piece of geometry. Um, let's see, I'm going to turn down the clones. Let's try and there we go. That still seems like too much. A fairly dense canopy now, which I like, which is what we're after. We got a lot of geometry going on now. It's a little different from how I typically work. A little bit more random. I don't like to lean into these random effectors as much as I am now. I like to control things a little more closely, but with this amount of geometry and variation, all the little pine needles and everything like that, it makes sense to utilize that tool. Let's see what that gets us. I have a feeling the lighting's going to get a lot cooler. We've got all that overhead stuff. A little bit more forest-like. Hey, Fardan. Thanks a lot for the nice comment. I have built some both assets for 3D that were assets for VR rather that were compiled in Unity. So I've output 3D stuff from Cinema 4D into VR in two different ways. The first of which is the one that I personally have less control over, although people who know Unity would have tons more control over. And that is basically just modeling the stuff, modeling and creating animations, and then exporting that as FBXs or other 3D model types that proper programmers can take and turn into interactive 3D scenes. That's the most powerful way, but I don't know much about Unity at all, so I'm not, that's not a way that I can really create finished VR content. The other way I've done it is to do what's basically just like VR videos, which is to output frames as stereoscopic 360 images, and then view those sort of like you would a video. So it allows for less interactivity, but it allows for me, someone who doesn't know a lot about programming, to really tightly control the experience and the look. So hopefully that answers your question. I just recently, and actually I'm going to be putting out a lot more 360 video content in the coming weeks and months, because I recently went ahead and invested in the Cineversity 360 VR Cam, which is a plugin for cinema, and it's been working really great. It's way faster than the technique I was using prior to that, which was just baking reflections off of a sphere, which is another workaround. And I have actually, there's an episode of The Practice, if you do a little searching, it's probably in the 30s, I think, episode 35, 33, maybe somewhere in there, where we go over that technique. It's a little bit more time intensive in terms of renderings than the VR Cam plugin that Cineversity provided. So I'd recommend the latter if you want to put out a lot more 360 content or really explore that that medium. The plug-in camera from Cineversity's really convenient and much faster and more powerful than baking reflection tags. That's typically not the best way to go about things, but that's a way you can do it without having to acquire or purchase any additional plugins. So something worth considering. Speaking of Cineversity, actually, that's a great reminder. I should say that if for anyone that's interested in motion capture, especially as it relates to Mixamo, I know we've done that a few times on this show, has created character animations using Mixamo and super fun technique. And that is a technique I learned from a buddy of mine named Steve Teeple. He goes by Teeps online. I'm sure a lot of you 3D and Cinema 4D enthusiasts already have seen and know his work. He's super talented guy. A lot of work, a lot of creation in VR. Actually, speaking of VR, he just last week released a really great tutorial on Cineversity that goes over in great detail how to take animations from Mixamo and apply them to your character models. But then not only that, how to download multiple animations of the same character from Mixamo and then stitch them together into one long scene. So I think his character like climbs a wall and runs down a pathway and does a flip, and it's really cool the way you can blend separate animations into one smooth progression. And Steve's awesome. He does a really good job outlining that. So I'd highly recommend you guys take a look at that tutorial. It just dropped. So one of the issues with this, and the reason it's not very realistic, obviously you can see right through the trees, right? So if this was a dense forest, you wouldn't be able to do that. And I'm not crazy about the performance of this model with all of this stuff back here. So I'm not just going to continue cloning these trees, but I think what I'm going to do is take some of these guys and just take the trunk and clone that out. I actually made a mistake of already just copying that before deleting the foliage. So Space these a little closer. Push these back here. Just sort of jack up the amount. Really don't want that much light peeking through. I really want to fill in this area. Oh. Hmm. You know, maybe the best way to do this is to do it by hand. Really just fill these gaps in. It's going to be much more efficient, although it's going to take a lot longer. Now we've got a little bit more of a dense backdrop. It's going to look more realistic. Another thing I think we can do to add some atmospheric perspective here is maybe go jump into this physical sky, add a bit of fog. This might be too much, this ground material that I'm creating here, but I'll give it a shot. Add a bit of a simple wood grain texture. There's that fog. It's feeling awfully foresty. Really dig that. Yeah, Chris, Teeps is the man. Hey, Jamie, thanks for stopping by, man. I'm sorry I missed your comment here. You have any experience with C4D House Builder? No, I've never heard of House Builder. If you've got any information, I'd love to see that. I've never heard of that. If you have a link, shoot it my way. I'd love to learn more. Uh-oh. Oh, man. Beach ball of death. I've definitely noticed that when you've got a really heavy model with a ton of geometry in it, if you go into this 4-up view mode, it gets really sluggish. I think that's obviously because the computer's previewing 4 versions of the geometry instead of just one. And when I'm live streaming, that's no bueno. So apologies for the delay here. Shit. All right, while this thing's freaking out, I'm going to grab another cup of coffee. Excuse me one sec. There we go. All right. I'm going to rotate this guy too, just to get a little bit longer shadow. Of course, the way the shadows fall is very important to the composition. Will have a big impact on how that looks ultimately. So I'm going to add a few more hills to the background. Maybe another way to tighten up some of those gaps in the trees. Right now, I really badly want to switch into that 4-up view. Throwing a bit of blue on these mountains is going to make them feel even further away, especially in conjunction with that fog we just added. The atmospheric perspective. I guess maybe somewhat of Purple Mountain's majesty on this fine 4th of July weekend. Ah, that is a good point, Chris. I did know about that feature and have been neglecting it so far this episode. Good call. And we got a ton of cloners in here, so that may very well save my life. Let's do this. I'm just going to type in cloner into the search thing. That way I can just select them all. Just turn on render instances. Don't break. There we go. Let's see what that does for performance. One thing I really like about these sequoias and a lot of actually big old trees, what you can see is you can see where the roots start going into the ground, right? I've got these trees tapering, but this is, especially in the foreground, this is an awfully abrupt transition between tree and ground. So what I think I'm going to do, not for all of them, just for these close-up fellas, what I can do is make a duplicate. Make that guy a lot shorter. And then that looks a little better already. So basically just took a copy of those cylinders that were making up this trunk, made them much shorter, copied the cloner down, and adjusted the angle. So now that it looks sort of like a root system. I'll probably only do that for these handful of trees in the foreground. If I had unlimited computational resources, I would definitely make a cloner for each of these. And have all these background trees have little root systems as well. But since we're streaming live as well, I don't think that's in the cards for today. All right. That's feeling really dark, so I think I'm just going to bite the bullet and throw GI on. And I think that render instances button did help a bit, Chris. Bit of a hiccup in the computer there. I think I want to start offsetting all of this really pointy, spindly, leafy looking texture with something a little bit more solid. I always love the simple shapes and forms that these primitives provide. I think I'm gonna just drop in a bit of some more simplified shapes to provide bit of variation, bit of interest. All right, so I'm going to risk crashing my computer by adding some hair to these guys. Just sort of made a selection of places where I want to add hair, and this hair will eventually be. I'm just a little bit worried with how my computer is handling this. I'm going to have some issues here, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So I've got this selected, and I'm going to add hair. Right, so far so good. So we've got our hair object. So I'm going to go ahead and alter this, get sort of a grassy underbrush kind of look going on. Since we're keeping it fairly simple here, I'm going to turn the segments way down and the length down a bit too. All right. So no crash, that's good. Hey Gustavo, thanks for joining us. Thanks for stopping by. Is that the Kid Mograph, Gustavo, the famous one? So if it is, we got all the talented popular artists stopping by the stream today. We had Aaron Haleli a little earlier. Huge influence, big fan of that guy's work. And of course, Kid Mograph, the very famous, very excellent. All right. Now, this is about as heavy a model, I think, as the computer can handle while I'm live streaming. So thanks for bearing with any technical difficulties that may have popped up. Starting to come together, starting to feel a little bit better. Try one last thing. I'm still not 100% satisfied with these pine trees as they are. So let's see here. I might make separate material for them. Do a little test here. Add a little bit of noisy alpha. That might break up that shape a little bit and make these feel a little bit better. Also want to evaluate transparency there. Sometimes forget to do that. Let's give that a shot. It's going to add to our render times, definitely, but it may break up these very obviously stacked cylinder shapes, which could be a good thing. One last thought is to maybe use some sphere shapes, just simple shapes to break up some of this canopy, because it's all feeling a little one note, a little bit all just the same kind of texture. But why don't I get smart and wait for this rendering to finish first? I also know that I'm liking the bump that we added to this tree trunk material, so I'm going to make that a little stronger. A little larger. Which I think will be good. You know, and this grass is actually looking kind of cool. I'm liking the effect that that has. We can do a couple things to update that. Oops. I'm going to add a few more too. All right. Whoops. That is not what I meant to move. Been sort of experimenting on the fly a lot this episode. A lot of times I have a fairly good idea of what exactly I want to create, and I knew that I wanted to celebrate the national parks and the national monuments, and being that it's the 4th of July here in America and the United States, that that really the national parks are a part of our heritage. Part of, I think, what makes this country great is our access to just absolutely stunning, beautiful, enormous wilderness, and I think that that's worth protecting. And I'm not extremely optimistic about some of the changes that are going to be happening, especially with the EPA being, increasingly funded less and less. It's like the National Park Services is not too happy about developments that affect that organization, and certainly this recent push to remove national monument status from 27 national monuments around the country is really no bueno. I love getting out there in the wilderness. I love hiking and camping, and like I said earlier in the show, um, the natural beauty that we have access to in America is one of my biggest influences in my work as well. It's really constantly inspiring and um, uplifting, and it's an enormous source of stress relief for me to get out there in the wilderness, and it has a big impact on the work that I create. So um, I thought, what better way to celebrate Independence Day and my country of the United States than to celebrate the beauty of sequoias and urge folks to check out some of the links that I dropped below. Contact your local officials and encourage them to not get behind the efforts to remove national monument status from some of our most beautiful natural resources. I thought about doing, maybe a bald eagle or some sort of typography, or, I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to celebrate Independence Day on the stream. And doing a little reading this morning before I got on, and convinced me to go in this direction and really try and celebrate the natural beauty of North America. That's about as political as I'm ever going to get on this show, so thanks for bearing with me. All right, let's check this out. I think the last thing I'm going to add to this scene, sort of up this open space around the middle, is this little boardwalk I just created. We've seen a lot of these national monuments, certainly in the one near my house, Muir Woods, and in the sequoias, are these little footpaths to keep you off the natural forest floor. Tend to see these at a little bit more of the touristy spots, but I think it'll be a nod to the national monuments, which tend to be a little bit more of touristy spots and some of the most beautiful locations in our national parks. It's obviously worth protecting, but it's also going to act as a sort of some leading lines to pull us through the composition. Ah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's it's something that you see. These boardwalks are something you see frequently at these national monuments, especially when they want to keep you off sort of the natural forest floor. But it acts as leading lines in the composition, which is very useful as well. Man, they're going a little slow in this model. It's not ideal for the live stream for sure. Whoops. So apologies for that. Bear with me. It's not going to get too much more complex since we're almost at well, we really are almost at the 2 hour mark. Got a slightly late start this week. Once we add this boardwalk and finish it up, knock out one more rendering, do a little bit of retouching, and we'll be calling it a stream. Uh-oh. So still feeling a little bit dark in here. So what I'm going to do is in the GI and gamma, I'm going to go to 1.2. People go as high as 2.2 to get that light bounce a little bit farther, but I'm only going to add a little bit of light bounce. I still want to retain some of that darkness. I'm also going to go into physical sky, and under sky, I'm going to add a little bit more to the intensity just to get a bit more fill light. We're still rendering over here from that last set of frames. All right. Getting there, getting there. Yeah, I think that that boardwalk does add a lot in terms of composition. Even I know that we're just kicking out this final rendering now. You even just see based on this pre-pass how much that's adding. It's going to take a few minutes to render out. So if anyone's got any work, any recent work that they want to share on the stream, now would be a perfect time. So if you've got anything you want to take a peek at, prep a link, send it over, and I'll fire it up. I'm almost done. Need another 15 minutes. Sorry, I'm running late today. Yeah. All right, getting there, getting there. Got it. Yeah, that's the way things go, right, Chris? I'm sitting on a couple projects as well that I'm really excited to share, but the companies that I made them for haven't officially launched them yet, so I got to sit on them for a little while longer. It's the name of the game. So I'm pretty pleased with where this piece is headed, where the model turned up. There's some issues. There's some things I would continue to work on under different circumstances. I think for a 2-hour exercise, it's fairly strong. I think we got a lot of our ideas across. The lighting works. I'm liking the way this fog is happening. I think this boardwalk was a great last minute addition in terms of improving the composition a little bit. I'm not 100% stoked on this sort of upper canopy. A lot of these bits feel a little bit stiff to me, a little bit unnatural. And these pine trees are pretty cool. They still do remind me a bit of those Lego pine trees from back in the day that just had a series of like segmented discs that sort of went up the height of the tree. I think the grass was a great last minute add, as were these little rocks. I'm liking the way the light is sort of filtering through the canopy, even though the shapes themselves I'm not totally sold on. Perhaps this is a situation where using an HDRI image of an actual forest may have given us slightly more realistic lighting. Another thing we could have done is taken a bunch of simple polygons, created a cloner and randomized it a little bit, and then put that in between the light source and some of these trees. Because you can see, back here we're getting some realistic sort of foresty shadowing on these trees. But since these are on the outer edges, these foreground trees are on the outer edges of the canopy, they're not really having any shadows cast on them, right? So this assumes that we're sort of standing at the edge of the forest, but if this wanted to look more like a deep forest, what we'd want to do is make sure that we're having some of these types of shadows being cast on these foreground trees as well. Which isn't something we're going to worry about for this exercise. It's something that we might want to keep an eye on if we're going to make something like this in the future. The nice thing about not having shadows on these foreground trees is they do sort of pop off of the background a little bit. So if we wanted to draw the attention to these trees as opposed to any of the ones in the background, that sort of lighting might achieve what we want in the image. So all stuff to consider. I do like the addition of these spheres to the canopy, mostly in the way that they affect the openings in the background here. I like kind of this curved upper shape. It gives us a better composition than just the sort of jagged edges of these simple fronds that we created. And we've even got some that are missing little gaps between the trunks and themselves, but that's all right. Really, this is not a 100% perfectly polished piece. It's a fairly complicated scene to put together in 2 hours, and we were dealing with some performance issues. So thanks for bearing with me on that. But like I was saying, all in all, I think a pretty cool, pretty respectable 2-hour exercise, right? So let's do a bit of last-minute color correction. We'll call it a finished piece. Certainly we want to get some of the brights popping in here because it's fairly dark in the background. That's feeling better already. There we go. I think some of that color correction really brought us a long way in terms of the overall quality of the image. Um, yeah, like I said, a few things that I would maybe handle slightly differently for next time. But as always, this is it's an exercise in practicing. It's not going to be perfect every single time. We want to consistently show up and try. Some things are going to work, some things aren't. Figuring out and getting a lot of what doesn't work under your belt allows you to move forward in a way that produces better results more consistently. So that's okay, right? We're getting the bad stuff out of our system so that in the future we can create more really good stuff. I think it's a solid 2-hour exercise. It's not my favorite piece ever, but I'm pleased with where it wound up, all things considered. And to awkwardly transition into really the whole idea behind the piece was really celebrating the beauty of the sequoias, the redwoods on the West Coast, and of course the need, I think, for our country to have national parks and national monuments. And since it is the 4th of July, and since I feel so strongly about this, I wanted to share sort of my love for the natural beauty of this country with you, and encourage you to read a little bit further and check out some of the links below. It seems that some of our national parks and monuments are under threat. It seems like natural gas and oil interests are competing with the interests of the national parks, and I hate to see those things go away for short-sighted energy goals. So anyway, I hate to get too political, but that's about the extent of my long-winded political statement for this podcast. Anyway, for this episode of The Practice, and I encourage you all to take a look and contact your local officials and encourage them not to do away with the national parks or with reclassifying some of the national monuments. So yeah. Aside from that bit of a soapbox stand, as always, it's been super fun. I love coming to the table and sharing my workflow with you guys. I hope it's inspired you to continue developing healthy habits for yourself, a good creative practice, and setting your eyes on the goals and chipping away at them every week. So thanks so much for tuning in. Couldn't do it without the repeat subscribers and viewers, so you know who you are. Thanks so much. If you enjoyed what you saw, hit like, hit subscribe, share it with a pal, hit the bell icon for notifications. And until next time, we'll see you next week at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing in the meantime, follow me on Instagram or Twitter at DLGNCE. And until then, we'll see you next time at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks. Happy Independence Day.